The first thing the Carters noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that presses against your ears until your thoughts feel too loud. As their car rolled into Black Hollow, Ohio, the welcome sign creaked even though there was no wind. Welcome home was carved deep into the wood, as if someone wanted it to last forever. Neighbors stood on their porches, smiling in perfect unison, waving slowly as the car passed. They already knew the family's names. They knew where the kids would sleep. They knew how long they planned to stay. That night, exhaustion finally pulled them into bed, but at exactly 3:17 a.m., every phone in the house buzzed at once. A notification from the security camera appeared. The screen showed the front of their home, lit by moonlight, and the Carters' smiles faded as they saw the entire neighborhood standing outside, men, women, children shoulder to shoulder, unmoving. No one knocked, no one spoke, they just watched. When the footage suddenly cut to black, the silence returned, heavier than before, as if the town itself had taken a breath and was waiting. The knocking began the second night, slow and patient, like someone with all the time in the world. Mrs. Carter froze in the hallway as the sound echoed from the back door. 3 knocks, always 3. When she looked through the peephole, there was nothing but darkness. The next morning, a neighbor named Ruth leaned over the fence and whispered, "If you hear your name after dark, don't answer, and whatever you do, don't leave town at night. Mr." Carter laughed it off until sunset came and the streetlights flickered on, bathing the town in a sickly yellow glow. Later, their daughter heard her voice called from outside her bedroom window, soft, loving, exactly like her mother's. She didn't answer. The fear truly set in when Mr. Carter tried to drive out of Black Hollow. The GPS spun wildly as the road bent and twisted, looping him back to the same gas station every time. The clerk looked at him with pity and said, "You shouldn't try that again." As night fell, the road signs changed, all pointing inward, as if the town refused to let go. The basement smelled like damp paper and old regret. While unpacking boxes, the eldest son found a loose panel behind the furnace. Inside were stacks of newspapers, yellowed and brittle. Each headline told the same story in different years. Family settles into Black Hollow, followed weeks later by a smaller article, family reported missing. No bodies, no suspects, just silence. The photos were worse. Smiling families stood in front of the same house the Carters now lived in. In the background of every photo, neighbors watched from the shadows, faces blurred but familiar. The dates spanned decades, spaced almost perfectly 10 years apart. When the family searched for the most recent article, their blood ran cold. It was dated 11 years ago. That night, the walls creaked as if someone were walking inside them. The house felt tighter, smaller, like it was adjusting to their presence. Mrs. Carter swore she heard whispering through the vents, repeating the same phrase over and over, "You're right on time." Sleep became impossible as the realization sank in they weren't the first, and they wouldn't be the last. The chanting started beneath their feet, low, rhythmic, and impossible to ignore. Following the sound after midnight, the eldest son slipped out of the house and traced it to the town hall. A hidden stairway behind a filing cabinet led underground. What he found made his hands shake. A massive chamber stretched below the town, shaped like a church but built from stone that looked wet and alive. Candles burned without melting. Names covered the walls, scratched deep into the rock, hundreds of them. He scanned the list until his breath caught. Carter. Every member of his family was already there, carved fresh, the grooves still dark. At the altar stood the sheriff and the townspeople, eyes rolled back, mouths moving in perfect sync. When one of them slowly turned and smiled, the candles blew out at once. The boy ran, the chanting chasing him up the stairs. When he burst into the house, gasping for air, his parents noticed something horrifying. The name Carter had begun appearing on the walls of their own living room. The televisions turned on by themselves at exactly 3:17 a.m. Every screen showed live footage of the Carters inside their home, angles from corners where no cameras existed. They watched themselves sleep, breathe, and tremble. The sheriff finally came clean. Sitting calmly at the kitchen table, he explained that Black Hollow wasn't just a town. It was a living thing. Long ago, something beneath the ground kept the people safe in exchange for families. New blood fed it. New fear strengthened it. The town watched so it could learn, so it could prepare. As he spoke, the windows darkened, reflecting faces that weren't there a moment before. The neighbors stood outside again, closer this time, their smiles stretching unnaturally wide. The sheriff stood to leave and paused at the door. "It's nothing personal," he said softly. "You were chosen." When he stepped outside, the door locked itself. The house groaned like a satisfied animal, and the screens went black, leaving the family alone with the sound of something moving inside the walls. The midnight festival began with music that didn't sound human. The Carters were escorted to the town square, dressed in white they didn't remember putting on. Lanterns floated above the crowd, casting shadows that moved on their own. As the chanting rose, the ground beneath their feet pulsed. The youngest daughter clutched her mother's hand, crying as cracks formed in the pavement. Black shapes seeped out like smoke, wrapping around ankles and wrists. The townspeople watched in silence, reverent and calm. When the ground opened beneath the child, her scream cut through the air, and then stopped. The hole sealed instantly, leaving nothing behind. The crowd cheered softly. Mrs. Carter collapsed, her grief swallowed by the sound of drums. The sheriff leaned close and whispered, "One down, it's almost over." The shadows retreated, but the town felt fuller, heavier, as if it had just eaten. The Carters were led home, broken and numb, knowing the town would not be satisfied yet. The road finally opened at dawn. Mrs. Carter stood at the edge of town, staring at the highway stretching beyond Black Hollow for the first time. A voice echoed in her head, ancient and patient. One must remain. The truth settled like ice in her chest. She kissed her husband and son good-bye, forcing a smile she didn't feel. As they drove away, the air shifted, and the road behind them vanished. Back in town, the houses straightened, the smiles returned, and the whispers stopped. Mrs. Carter felt the town wrap around her, filling the empty space where her family had been. Days passed, then weeks. The grief dulled, replaced by something quieter, heavier. She began to understand the town's rhythms, its hunger, its rules. The fear faded. When she looked in the mirror, her smile looked just like the others, natural, permanent. The silence broke with the sound of a car engine. A new family rolled into Black Hollow, eyes wide, hopeful, unaware. A fresh sign stood at the edge of town, newly carved, "Welcome home." Mrs. Carter watched from her porch, waving slowly as the car passed. She knew their names already. She knew which room the children would choose. That night at 3:17 a.m., the neighborhood gathered outside the house together. Mrs. Carter stood at the front, her smile calm and knowing. The town breathed deeply, satisfied and awake. Beneath the ground, something stirred, ready to feed again.